Paranormal Northwest, a podcast all about the history and the paranormal of the Pacific Northwest. Join me as I tell stories of this great region, the history, the people who live here, and those who may have never left. This episode, we're heading to Idaho and spending a good deal of time in the Great Basin as a whole. As with most of my episodes, the paranormal location is really just a starting point that guides my research. I think it's incredibly important to understand the history of a place, including the land, not just the physical structures that are still standing. I believe energy surrounds all of us in some form or another, and that energy is impacted by, as well as affects, the people who live on that land. So sometimes I end up going down a rabbit hole of research, and we may forget where we're starting, or even what the title of this episode is, but we get there eventually. So today we're taking a look at Owyhee Plaza Hotel in Boise, Idaho. So grab your sweater, your blanket, and a cup of tea, and let's get started. Located in Boise, Idaho, the Owyhee Plaza Hotel was built following the economic boom in the 1890s that brought the Oregon Short Rail Line to the area. The building itself was built in 1910. Originally planned to have 125 rooms, it now only has 99. And we'll come back to that. But first, I want to talk about the name itself. This was one of my fun little rabbit holes. The name is actually a variation of the word Hawaii, obviously with a different spelling. The name comes from what the people of the Hawaiian Islands were called by the British travelers and traders they interacted with. A small group of them were part of an expedition that explored what is now southern Idaho, eastern Oregon, and northern Nevada. The name Owyhee still persists in the area in names such as the Owyhee River, Owyhee County, and of course, the Owyhee Plaza Hotel. Throughout its history as a hotel, the Owyhee was known for its beautiful rooftop garden. Guests were able to enjoy not just the garden, but also a dance floor, restaurant, and bar on the rooftop. In 1940, the hotel began its first series of renovations. Over the course of the 20th century, the Owyhee underwent over 30 renovation projects. Many of the original features of the building were removed and quote-unquote updated, particularly in the 1960s and 70s. This led to the building looking somewhat mismatched and out of place. Guest rooms were slowly converted into office spaces, and the rooftop was closed for good in the 1960s. At that time, the Ore-Ida Company leased the top 3 floors of the building for their headquarters. Yes, the French fry company, Ore-Ida. We are talking about Idaho. Today, the building is no longer a hotel, but a venue space and apartments. Let's talk about the location now. Boise is the capital of the state of Idaho and is also the most populated city in the state. Located in the southwest corner, it is only about 40 miles from Oregon and about 100 from Nevada. For a more in-depth look at Boise and how it came to be, listen to my episode 13 on the old Idaho State Penitentiary. We are, however, going to take a look at the greater Boise area, known as Treasure Valley. Treasure Valley is in both the southwestern portion of Idaho as well as partially in eastern Oregon. The valley was created as the Paiute, Boise, Weiser, Malheur, Owyhee, and Burnt rivers drain into the larger Snake River. The Snake River then itself drains into the Columbia River and further down into the Pacific Ocean. The area was known by different names: the Lower Snake River Valley and the Boise River Valley. It was not named Treasure Valley until 1959, when the president of the local Chamber of Commerce named it Treasure Valley. Today, approximately 850,000 people live in the Treasure Valley area. Treasure Valley is the ancestral home of both the Northern Paiute and the Shoshone tribes. I've looked in depth at the Shoshone people in previous episodes, so I want to talk about the Northern Paiute people now. The Northern Paiute are a native group belonging to the Numic language group. They traditionally lived in the Great Basin region of the American West. This area encompasses land in what is now Idaho, Oregon, California, and Utah. The Great Basin is also one of the most environmentally hostile areas of the United States, if not the most hostile area. To me, that fact alone speaks to the resilience of the people who lived and settled there in the past. To thrive in this area, the Northern Paiute lived in small groups, or bands. These bands were often settled around a centralized lake or wetland. This water source would then supply them with both water and food. Similar to the Shoshone, the bands of the Northern Paiute would often combine with other bands to hunt, or even in times of drastic weather. They were also often linked through familial bonds. As settlers began to flood the West, the Northern Paiute became less nomadic, in an attempt to negotiate with these new settlers easier. This change also caused an interesting change in gender roles. In a nomadic society, both men and women often have the same jobs, as everyone is needed to pitch in. But in a more settled or sedentary society, the men left to work and the women were tasked with caring for the home and children. The Northern Paiute generally had a peaceful relationship with their Shoshone neighbors, but not all of their neighbors. The Northern Paiute were almost constantly at war with the Klamath and Okomawi people surrounding them. This may have been due to the fact that the Northern Paiute had migrated from the south to the area that had traditionally been held by the other two groups. Even with this conflict, nearly as soon as Europeans and Americans began to enter the region, they also encountered conflict with the Northern Paiute. Even though the Northern Paiute had adopted the use of the horse, their traditions and culture were minimally affected by European influence. This may have been part of the conflict settlers faced in the area. Throughout the mid-part of the 1800s, there were many conflicts and acts of violence between the settlers and the native people in the area. One of these conflicts became known as the Paiute War. Even though the actual conflict saw the Northern Paiute allied with the Shoshone and Bannock people, the Paiute War took place in the summer of 1860, near Pyramid Lake. The quote-unquote war itself was only in 1860, but it was preceded by a series of attacks by both the native groups as well as by the settlers. These started as a series of raids in 1857, led by the Paiute war chief Numaga. A treaty was signed by the Paiute and the white settlers, noting that any further instigators of violence, whether native or white, would be turned over to the authorities. The following year from the treaty, in 1859, an extremely harsh winter caused food shortages for everyone in the region. With the discovery of the Comstock lode, a large silver deposit in Virginia City, Nevada, more settlers flooded the area. Tensions that were barely being held back were at a boiling point. On January 13, 1860, a white settler, Dexter Deming, was murdered. The culprit? A group of Paiutes that had broken away from Namuga and the chief Winnemucca. This group was led by Chief Saba. The territorial governor, Isaac Roop, ordered Captain William Weatherlow and Thomas Harvey to meet with Namuga at Pyramid Lake to determine what had happened. However, on their journey, Weatherlow and Harvey were captured by Chief Saba's group. Fortunately, one of the members of the group personally knew Harvey and had actually lived with him as a child. Because of this, he was able to convince the group to release Harvey and to later release Weatherlow. The men were able to continue to Pyramid Lake and met with Namuga. However, Namuga wouldn't admit to his people being involved. He even said he would not intervene if any of his people committed crimes against the settlers. Weatherlow and Harvey saw that they were on the precipice of war. As they journeyed back to the governor, they warned any farmers they encountered. The farmers informed the men that Namuga had been blackmailing them, and that he required them to pay him 2 cattle a week as retribution. The territorial government began to prepare for war, but the settlers of the region did not think the Paiutes would continue to attack. It became known that Dexter Deming's brother had killed a Paiute, and many settlers thought Dexter's death had been in retribution for that attack. Regardless, the government prepared for war. In early May of 1860, Williams Station in present-day Nevada was attacked. When the owner of the station, James Williams, returned on May 8th, he discovered the mutilated bodies of his 2 brothers and a few other white settlers. The Paiute and Bannock groups admitted to the attack, with valid cause. Conflicting stories describe exactly what led to the attack, but they all involve 2 young Paiute children being taken by the Williams brothers. The party that attacked and massacred the settlers was a Paiute rescue party, coming to rescue the children. A few days later, another Pony Express station was attacked. As with much of the conflict between native peoples and white settlers, it didn't matter who was at fault, or who fired the first shot, so to speak. The settlers were scared, and a militia was formed. Over the course of about a year, there were more skirmishes, but ultimately, a treaty was signed near Pyramid Lake, Nevada, in the summer of 1861. The Paiute War was just one in a series of conflicts between the Northern Paiutes and white settlers in the region. Even though the conflicts in the 1860s and 1870s did leave many Northern Paiute dead, what led to the greater demise of the people was the introduction of European illnesses. As the population of the Northern Paiute dwindled and the population of white settlers in the area increased, a reservation was created. The Malheur Indian Reservation was established on September 12, 1872 by President Ulysses S. Grant. This reservation was established in eastern Oregon, in portions of what is now Grant and Baker counties. The reservation was created with the intent to decrease, or hopefully eliminate, any lingering conflicts between the Paiutes and the white settlers. The Paiute who traveled to the reservation were from the Idaho, Nevada, Oregon, and Northern California areas. Many of these Paiutes had been living at various United States forts in the region. Nearly 800 Paiute moved to the reservation and faced immediate conflict with their new white neighbors. White settlers immediately requested the reduction of the reservation land so that they could take over or claim that land. Between 1872 and 1879, the Paiute and Bannock that had settled on the reservation were battered by constant attacks and fighting with the white settlers in the region. In November of 1878, nearly 600 of the remaining residents on the reservation were removed to the Yakima Reservation in the Washington Territory. The reservation was officially closed, or discontinued in government speak, in August of 1879. Today, there are an estimated 17,000 people with Paiute ancestry. The Paiutes are not a federally recognized tribe in the United States. However, there are groups in the region that have ancestral ties to all bands of the Paiutes. These groups and federally recognized tribes are located in Idaho, Oregon, Nevada, Utah, and California. Now back to the Owyhee Plaza Hotel and its paranormal information, or what little I could find on it. The most common story I could find was that there was once a woman who was staying in room 136 who awoke to another woman standing in her room. The guest said she felt calmed by the other woman's presence, enough so that she asked who she was. However, she never got an answer before the woman vanished. There have also been numerous reports of strange and unexplained noises all throughout the building. And that's it. Aside from being on nearly every haunted Idaho list, there really isn't that much to say about the paranormal aspect of the Owyhee Plaza Hotel. If you ever own paranormal stories from there, I would love to hear them. You can send me those stories and any other paranormal stories you have to paranwpod@gmail.com. So thank you for joining me today and visiting the Great Basin. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at paranwpod. I share photos and fun facts about our locations. Until next time, bye!